Hi, everyone. Welcome to Memphis Theological Seminary's Facebook page. Happy Friday. Hope everybody has had a wonderful week so far. We are coming to you guys live today for our final day of Social Justice Week. In a couple of minutes here, I'll be talking with Dr. Gacke about the intersections between Memphis Theological Seminary and justice. So really excited for that conversation, but I do want to take just a minute to shout out our previous conversations that we've had this week for Social Justice Week. On Monday, we had 4 panelists join us to talk about their work around racial justice and the impact that Memphis Theological Seminary had on their time there and the work that they do now. On Tuesday, we had 3 panelists join us to talk about food justice. On Wednesday, we had another 3 panelists join us to talk about educational justice. And then yesterday, we had Dr. Gacke and Reverend Anderson join us to talk about their work in housing justice. So each of these conversations have a wonderful dive, not only into the important justice work in those fields in the Memphis community and beyond, but of course, how MTS plays into that and the impact that it's had on those students' personal lives, and of course, the work that they do out in the community. So let's go ahead and chat with Dr. Gacke today about MTS and justice. Dr. Gacke, thanks for joining us today. We'd just love for you to introduce yourself and your role at MTS, and then of course, how justice plays into our wonderful seminary.
Great, thank you, Luke. It's good to be here. Greetings to everybody who's joining in. I'm Dr. Pete Gacke. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs, Dean, and Professor of Christian Ethics at Memphis Theological Seminary. I've been here going on 15 years this year. And I am the person who at MTS helps to guide the development of the curriculum and the faculty. And all of our development of curriculum and faculty revolves around our mission statement. And central to that mission statement is that we are here to educate and sustain clergy and other leaders in the Christian faith around the values of scholarship, piety, and justice. I'm really delighted that our mission statement uses the word justice and the other words, scholarship and piety, and it holds them together. Because they really do feed into each other when they're done well. So I'll start by talking a little bit about scholarship, piety, and justice, and then move into some things about the history of MTS that reflect that mission. And then we can talk about sort of what's going on now. So scholarship, piety, and justice, head, heart, and hands. Sometimes we use that language. But scholarship is critical inquiry and reflection upon our life of faith. And our life in faith is especially informed by the Word of God in the Bible and the Word of God as it comes to us through human life and the life of the world as a whole. Sometimes that gets summed up as tradition, but it's really a rich field of experience, and critical inquiry and critical reflection says that we ask questions. We are people who are on a journey of faith. And so along the way, we ask questions about who is God and how is God involved? What does it mean to say that I'm a disciple of Jesus? How is the Holy Spirit active in our lives today? What is sin? What's redemption? What do we mean by those big terms that we toss around so easily sometimes? But we need to dig into this, dig into the Bible, dig into into Christian history, Christian theology, into other religions and their importance within the world, and how are they related to Christianity? So we're a place that is not afraid to ask questions and to ask the hard questions and to enter into conversation with each other, with dialogue with each other about our own experiences, our own thoughts, how we've been shaped by whatever church we've belonged to, by the life of faith that we're practicing these days. Ask those questions seek answers, even when they're disturbing to the way we're doing things now or the way we've been thinking in the past. So scholarship keeps us fresh in the life of faith, because we're not simply parroting what we've heard before, but we are probing into what we've heard before and hopefully growing as we delve into the life of faith. And that's, of course, related then to piety. Piety is kind of an old-fashioned word. And I like the word piety because it distinguishes us a little bit from the more contemporary word of spirituality. But piety is grounded in that life of questioning, that life of dialogue with God, with each other, and dialogue with our experience in the broader creation. Piety is concerned with our growth in our relationship with God and with each other and the whole creation. Piety asks us to enter into those relationships with reverence, with respect, even with the sense of the biblical word of fear, which really gets at that acknowledgement of one's own humility before a mystery that we need to enter into and to be shaped by. And so scholarship and piety feed into each other. It's the life of faith needs to be questioned, needs to be examined critically, avoid that sort of problem of falling into kind of a cult, and just absolute obedience in which our humanity is sacrificed. So piety is a way in which we grow in relationship with God and others, as we respect the otherness of God and the otherness of others. And that, of course, all ties into justice. When we use the word justice, we're primarily grounding ourselves in a biblical notion of justice, which is right relationship with God, with each other, and with the entirety of God's creation. God calls us to justice because God calls us to flourish as human beings within God's creation. Do a little Bible quote here of Jesus saying that he has come that we may have life and have it to the full. Well, how do we have life to the full? We have life to the full when we are in right relationship with God, with each other, and with God's creation. And that right relationship with God is crucial because we are made for union with God. We're made with that divine purpose and that divine destiny. And so if we're not in right relationship with God, we can't be in right relationship with each other and with the creation. So how do we stay in right relationship, or how do we be in right relationship? Well, it comes through God's gracious intervention in our lives and the redemptive intervention of God in our lives that sets us straight, so to speak, puts us on the right path. And then we work alongside with God to continue on that right path so that we will flourish in relationship with each other. So our purpose at MTS is to keep those three things in relationship with each other, of scholarship, piety, and justice, because if you think about how to live decently as a disciple of Jesus and how to do ministry, they're really very closely related, obviously. If we're denying our questions, if we're denying our ability to think critically, and if we're not continually re-examining what we have received within the Christian life, we wouldn't do very well in terms of leadership within a community of faith. So scholarship remains essential all the way through. If we don't have a life of prayer, of worship, of Christian community, of growth with each other in the life of faith, in other words, if we're not living a life of piety, it'd be pretty tough to be able to share anything worthwhile of the Christian life with others if we're not living it ourselves. There's a word called hypocrisy that would apply there if we're sort of trying to call other people into the Christian life, but we're not leading it ourselves. And then finally, justice. The whole point of God's relationship with us is so that we do well as human beings, that we live into and up to what God calls us to be. And that's what justice does within our own lives and within the lives of others. You know, in Christian theology, we often talk about justification. Justification is being made right with God. And of course, that's done through the saving work of Jesus Christ. But being made right with God is then to be lived out in being made right with others. And that's how we live the justification out in the way in which we are in right relationship in political life, economic life, our sexual lives, you name it, the entirety of human life. So that's what we're trying to be about at MTS, inviting people into a community that's committed to those three things of scholarship, piety, and justice, so that we flourish in our lives as people of faith, and then we can share that flourishing with others whom we come into contact with in our lives of faith, our life of ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was such an incredible overview of the values that MTS brings to everything that it does. The consistent conversations that I have with students and alumni is that you're not required to think anything when you come to MTS, right? What you are required to do is back up your thoughts. We're not going to define what you believe, but we want you to have that theological foundation, something to lean back on, something that when you're talking to others, when you're sharing with your congregation or with your work or with others, that you can lean back on that and make sure that you're really righteous in what you believe. And again, we're not telling you what to believe, but again, helping you lead to that life of scholarship, piety, and justice so that you can fulfill it in all that you do. So let's dive a little bit more into that idea of justice. We'd just love to know, let's talk specifically about our master degree programs. We have a couple of master degree programs here at MTS, the Master of Divinity. That's our longer master degree program. It's about 84 credit hours. A lot of students pursue that if they're interested in being ordained or becoming ministers in churches, but there are other reasons too. People go on to become chaplains, go and work in nonprofits and otherwise. And then we have our Master of Arts in Christian Ministry, which is a 48 credit hour program, so a little bit shorter, with specialties, things like Christian education, youth and young adult ministry, Methodist ministry. So how does justice kind of play into our master degree programs? And how do students engage in that justice work?
I think that the primary way in which justice is reflected in both the MDiv and the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry is attention to the question of so what? So we're studying, say, the New Testament. Say we're in the Gospel of Mark with Dr. Mitzi Miner. Well, so what if Jesus rose from the dead? What practical implications are there for our belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Or so what that we have a theological conviction that of this thing called sin? What difference does that make in the way in which we relate with each other and we regard ourselves in relationship with each other? What are manifestations of sin in our own lives, in our political life, our economic life, in our relationship with the creation? So that so what question is always pointing us to what difference does it make that we are people of faith, that we're people who know theology. Well, great, you know Calvin. Well, so what? What difference does that make in the way in which you interact with other people? What difference does that make in the way in which you even approach the mysterious reality of God? What have you learned from Calvin that affects the way in which you live? And of course, this comes out of my own background, being a professor of Christian ethics. I'm always asking that so what question with every aspect. But I think at Memphis Theological Seminary, for all of our classes, we want to ask the question, what difference does this make in our own lives and in the lives of other people that we're going to be in relationship with in ministry? So that's kind of the broad view of that. But then more specifically, of course, we have justice built right into the curriculum, or an emphasis upon justice, in that most classes are going to have attention to justice. So again, if we're doing biblical studies, we need to ask, what are the voices that have not been attended to in biblical texts? Or what does it mean to try and think through what Isaiah or Jeremiah the prophet means for today and their critique of the economic injustice and the political injustice that was in ancient Israel? How might that apply to today? Or if we're in a class on evangelism and mission, what does it mean to evangelize in a way that's respectful of the human beings that we're in conversation with? What does it mean to do mission in a way that leads to human flourishing, that's consistent with the reign of God? So we ask those questions within each class, and each class is going to ask it in relationship to whatever particular aspect of Christian biblical scholarship or theological scholarship or the practice of ministry is reflected in the class. And then we also have those times in which we are asking the students to be out in the community in a context of ministry and to reflect upon that context of ministry using their biblical knowledge and theological knowledge with the question of what difference is it making in your practice of ministry to have a view of Christian redemption, of sanctification, of sin, of salvation, your view of eschatology. How is that playing out in your context of ministry? And how is that context of ministry shaping your theology at the same time? So we ask students in both the MACM and the MDiv, there's a required practice of ministry as part of their formation in ministry. And also each of those degrees ends with an integrative seminar that is asking the students to reflect back on their theological education at the seminary in light of the ministry that they're going into or they're continuing in after their graduation. So we encourage students all through across the curriculum to be attending to the justice question. And we are asking students at particular points in the curriculum to dive into ministry contexts in which the justice issue needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another really wonderful program within the MACM degree is that social justice concentration. If this is really your focus, maybe you're working in a nonprofit, maybe you're working with young people, but your main concern is having them have better access to resources and opportunities, then you can do a program where all of your extracurricular work is focused in, and all of your electives are focused in social justice. So taking classes on civil rights and theology, the women's rights movement and theology, and so on and so forth. I think a really wonderful thing that you've shared here is this just diving into all of these questions. I think a similar theme that a lot of our students go through is that this is not necessarily conversations they have in the church. That it's the seminary that brings out these conversations, that dives into these deep themes of justice and relating it to who you are personally as a theologian, and then of course the work that you do out in the community. Well, let's turn into our DMin programs for a little bit. How do we bring in justice into the Doctrine of Ministry program that we have here at MTS with, of course, 9 different concentrations?
Yeah, and what those 9 have in common is the mission of Memphis Theological Seminary. So they're all organized around scholarship, piety, and justice. And so those emphases will continue throughout the coursework in each one of those tracks. But we also have in each one of those tracks an immersion experience so that students have the opportunity to reflectively engage with a context of ministry related to the particular track that they're taking. So for example, in the land, food, and faith concentration, the immersion has often taken the form of going to a variety of places that are engaged with care for the land and food production. So that students get a different sense of or how different people and different communities are addressing the issues of care for the land and the production and distribution food that's good for human beings. So each of those tracks will have an immersion that will help to ground the students in the actual practice within whatever track that they're in. But also the DMin project is a crucial aspect of justice within each of those tracks, because the DMin project asks students to identify a problem or challenge within ministry. And it's a problem or a challenge because it's an area that could be affecting people adversely. And therefore, it's an area in which we want to do good practice so that people can flourish. So identifying that problem and then addressing it with the wisdom and the scholarship and the piety within the particular track that the student is in order to come up with a response to that problem or that challenge that will lead to human good. And then being able to write that up in their DMin project report so that it can be shared with other people who are in the ministry, who sort of come after those folks who have done this work. So the DMin, Doctor of Ministry, is very much it's a practical degree that is asking that so what question. So we learn, say, how to be a better preacher. Well, then the question is, what are you going to preach that's going to actually help your congregation to do better in the life of Christian faith? And that doing better in the life of Christian faith is going to mean that we're doing better in our relationships with God, certainly, but also with each other and with the entirety of God's creation. So the way in which each of those tracks is united again is around the mission: scholarship, piety, and justice. And keeping justice in that rotation of values is going to affect the way in which people study and end up with their DMin project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this week of conversation that we've had during Social Justice Week, if you're interested in what some of these DMin projects look like, I would definitely encourage you guys to go back and check those out. You can find them just by scrolling down our Facebook feed, and you'll see stories from people like Reverend Yvette Blair, who lives in the Dallas community, is really focused on food justice and specifically food deserts. That's areas in which there's no grocery store or fresh produce available within a mile. And what she's done is focused her work on advocacy, on bringing the community together to champion for grocery stores and, again, farmers markets, fresh produce to be brought to that community so that, again, they can eat healthy food and, live healthier lives. And you can really dive into all of the different justice work that our students are doing and hear some of those DMin projects. And it's just really incredible work. And it's that hands-on ministry. I think that's such an important part of the DMin program. It's a practical degree. You're going out, you're getting engaged in the community. You're doing a DMin project in the moment. You're studying people in the moment. You're gathering data in the moment. And then, of course, you're writing it up and gathering all of your thoughts and ideas at the end. So yeah,
and that's really, I would say, if at the master's level, the Master of Arts in Christian Ministry, the integrative seminar is like a mini DMin project.
Right.
So again, we're identifying an issue and it's a smaller issue that can be addressed in a kind of a smaller way, but it's laying the groundwork for a kind of method or approach to this work of justice in the practice of ministry. And in the MDiv integrative seminar, it revolves around case studies in ministry. So the multiple issues that come up in the leadership of a congregation, how are you going to address those in ways that are good for the members of your congregation or the people that you're serving as a chaplain? How are you going to do that in a way that is life affirming rather than death dealing? And that's what we're trying to do, is that God is calling us to life. And so how do we work with God in order to be doing the work of God in the communities of faith that we're serving? That's a crucial question. There's way too much Christianity these days that is death dealing, that's oppressive, that is stultifying, and it deadens us. So what we're trying to find is to be consistent with the life and ministry of Jesus. We want to be agents of life, to be part of that mission of Jesus, to bring us to life to the full. And in order to do that, we have to ask hard questions about what is economic justice? What is political justice? What does it mean to be in right relationship with each other? That requires also looking into history, into biology, into sociology. So it's a real challenge for us in leadership in ministry, because we need to be aware of and conversant with all those kind of different areas of human life, because we're asking the overarching question of how does this all hold together in a way that leads to the well-being of humans and of the creation as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we've talked about here today, the really incredible thing about MTS is that you're not just having those conversations, but you're doing those things in the real world. You're coming up with your own ideas and hypotheses, and then seeing how they really work, trying them out, engaging with real people and communities to see how you can, again, spread that life-giving work that you mentioned previously. You touched a little bit ago on our faculty, so I do want to bring it to them and just have you chat a little bit with us about how are our faculty connected to justice? How are they living out their justice through their teaching and, of course, the other work that they do?
So we've talked a little bit about, in terms of teaching, that the faculty here are committed to the mission statement of the seminary, of scholarship. That clearly they're folks that have their advanced degrees, PhDs and DMins who are teaching. So they're going to make sure that we're asking those critical questions and we're engaging with lively conversation around biblical texts, around the theology and the history of the church. But at the same time, as faculty, we are bringing to bear our own life experiences in terms of the practice of ministry. And so we have people who are on the faculty who are pastors. We have people who are active in nonprofits. We have people who are on the boards of nonprofits, active in churches in a variety of ways. If they're not the actual pastor, they have other leadership roles within the congregations. So every faculty member here is a practitioner of the faith in other contexts other than the seminary. And that is from myself, helping to direct Manna House, a place of hospitality for people on the streets. Paul Davis, who's the pastor of St. Paul Baptist Church, one of the largest African-American congregations in the city. Dr. Mitzi Miner, who does Christian education in a wide variety of churches around the city. Dr. Baker, who is on the board of several nonprofits. And then you go to a social justice event in the city of Memphis, and inevitably you're going to run into several faculty member from Memphis Theological Seminary. And this is in our very DNA as an institution. When the seminary moved to Memphis in 1964, and a lot of young people might not think, oh, 1964, that's a long time ago. What was going on in 1964? Well, in 1964 was Freedom Summer. So that's when the real movement for voting rights for African Americans in the state of Mississippi was going on in the summer of 1964. That's when Memphis Theological Seminary came to Memphis and opened its doors for African American students. And then fast forward about 4 years into 1968, the sanitation workers strike is going on here in Memphis, and eventually brought Dr. King to Memphis. Who's marching in the sanitation workers strike besides the sanitation workers? Students and faculty from Memphis Theological Seminary. Who's been involved with work for economic justice or food justice in the city of Memphis? It's students and faculty from Memphis Theological Seminary. Who's providing leadership in the churches that are doing great work in a variety of areas in Memphis? Graduates of Memphis Theological Seminary and some faculty of Memphis Theological Seminary. Who leads the Benjamin Hooks Institute at the University of Memphis? Why? It just happens to be the Reverend Dr. Andre Johnson, who's a proud graduate of Memphis Theological Seminary and often teaches here. Who's leading voting rights struggle and movement within the city of Memphis? Well, it happens to be the Reverend Dr. Earl Fisher, another graduate of Memphis Theological Seminary. So if you ask, what's the sort of the breeding place for folks who are engaged with the work for justice in the city of Memphis, it's Memphis Theological Seminary. We're the place that's committed to the well-being of others in the community. We're committed to the well-being of the creation as a whole. And it plays out in our graduates. So we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We're doing what we say that we're doing. And because of that, it's an exciting place to be on the faculty, and it's an exciting place to be a student, because this is not just people sort of mulling through, the dead hands of the long past. We're asking, how are those hands going to be made alive, brought to life in our current context? What does it mean to say Jesus Christ is Lord? Certainly we can sort of say, well, that means that Jesus runs, my life. But what does that mean politically, economically? What does it mean in terms of our sexuality? Those are questions that we take the deep dive into in the context of the seminary, so that we can invite people into that conversation and that kind of activism outside of the seminary as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to also give a shout out to all of the MTS alumni who are chaplains in the Memphis area. Obviously, healthcare is one of the largest employers in Memphis, and at every single major hospital network in Memphis, we have at least one or two chaplains who graduated from MTS. I also think it's really reflected in the visiting faculty that we bring to Memphis Theological Seminary. We obviously have these incredible doctorate programs that we often bring in visiting faculty, and they are bivocational as well. Not only are career scholars with advanced degrees, but are doing that hands-on work in the community through nonprofits, advocacy work, and so on and so forth. Well, really want to thank you for joining us today, Dr. Gacke. Was there anything else that you would like to share in terms of the connection between justice and MTS, or maybe any words of wisdom you might have for students who are discerning their next steps and are considering MTS as a possible route?
Well, I'd just add, maybe you could pick, get it from the passion that's in my voice, but I think Memphis Theological Seminary is a distinctive place for theological education, because it is always committed to the so what question, and it is committed to engaging in conversation around the challenges and the difficulties, of which there are many in our society and the world as a whole. We don't shrink from those conversations, as difficult as they are, and we engage in those conversations informed by our life of Christian faith. So we do it in ways that are loving and inviting and welcoming, so that people can grow in that conversation rather than sort of get pigeonholed or pushed away. And because of that emphasis here, then we're able to bring that, I hope, out into the broader community, which is so bitterly divided these days. We need to find ways to pull people together into conversation, to not avoid conflict. We're not, to be a Christian does not mean you run from conflict. It means you embrace conflict so that we can grow together in the creative tension that we're all experiencing in our lives as human beings. So I'd invite people, if you want to come to a place that's excited about being a disciple of Jesus, in a way that affects the way in which we live with each other and with the whole of God's creation, so that we can give glory to God, this is the place to do it.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I would also say, if you're like a lot of us who don't know where to begin, but justice is something that you think about daily, something that you're committed to, consider Memphis Theological Seminary. You don't have to know your passion. You don't have to know that your focus is educational justice when you walk in the door. That's part of what seminary is here to do, is to help lead you and guide you to that point, to help you connect deeper to God and to yourself and your community, so that you can find where your greatest skills and talents meet the world's greatest needs.
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you again, Dr. Gacke.
Sure, thank you.
We really appreciate you joining us. For those of us who are on Facebook, I'm gonna ask you guys to stay with us for a few minutes longer so I can share our website and a couple of notes with you guys. But again, thank you to Dr. Gacke for joining us. I really appreciate it and hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks, take care.
All right, those of you guys who are still with us, I'm gonna share my screen right now. And what you should see is Memphis Theological Seminary's website popping up. There are a couple of things that I want to show you guys. First of all, if you've enjoyed the conversations today and you want to learn more about Memphis Theological Seminary before applying, I would encourage you to click the Schedule a Visit page up here at the top. It's on every single part of the MTS website, so you can always find it. Scroll down and you'll see a lot of options to interact with our incredible admissions team, who can answer so many questions about MTS and a lot of the things that maybe we didn't talk about today, including things like tuition costs, scholarships, more about our faculty and our curriculum. Whatever you have questions about, we're happy to help. So a few different options. Click the Schedule a Visit if you'd like to sign up to either do a in-person or virtual visit. If you come in person, we'd love to have you, chat with you and answer any questions you might have. Or if you're not able to make it to our campus, we can do a virtual conversation over Zoom or over the phone and talk to you that way. If you'd rather us reach out directly to you, hit this Request Information button and we'll get back to you in a day or two with information about our seminary. If you're unable to come in person, we do have a really wonderful virtual campus tour that you can watch. And then we do have a really wonderful upcoming master degree preview day. If you've heard the conversations this week and today, and you're really interested in our Master of Divinity or our Master of Arts in Christian Ministry, this coming Monday, March the 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. Central, we'll be having our Master Degree Preview Day. What that looks like is if you sign up, you'll have an opportunity to sit in on a classroom and experience what it's like to learn from an MTS professor and see obviously the students and professor interact with each other as they do in every single MTS course. And then you'll have a little bit of time to learn directly from our admissions team about the process of applying to MTS and other information that's important. Also, if you're ready to go ahead and apply, you can just click this Apply button up at the top of our website page. And what you'll see is a really helpful step-by-step guide on the application process. You're also welcome to just reach out to myself or my coworker, Dr. Levant, or our admissions team, and we can send this to you via email, but it's all available on our website as well. And what you'll see here is an app that you can download to do the application, or a way to do it online, and a step-by-step instruction. So we have an online application. We are actually waiving our application fee, which is normally $45 for master degree students and $65 for doctoral students. We're waiving that completely right now. We do ask for transcripts and recommendations and a personal essay. And so again, all of that information is right here, or please reach out to our team in the admissions office and we can help you with that as well. Also wanted to shout out our Memphis Theological Seminary YouTube page. I think this is a really incredible resource for students who are interested in MTS and want to hear more directly from students, professors, and alumni about what it's like to be a part of Memphis Theological Seminary. So all you got to do to find us is go into YouTube and type in our name, and you'll find lots of helpful videos like our weekly chapel series, but also things we've done previously. Like, for example, we have 5 Doctrine of Ministry programs coming up in 2022. And what we've done is put together virtual information sessions for all 5 focuses. So land, food, and faith, forming and growing churches in the 21st century, educational leadership. They're all up here. You can learn about the programs directly from the students who take it, the professors who teach them, and the alumni who have graduated from them. So want to thank everybody again for joining us for our Social Justice Week. It has been such a wonderful week of incredible conversations. I just want to encourage anybody again, if you missed any of our conversations Monday through Thursday, you can definitely find them on our Facebook feed or by going up to the very top, clicking the live option and seeing all of our live videos. On Monday, we talked about racial justice. On Tuesday, food justice. On Wednesday, educational justice. On Thursday, housing justice. And then, of course, today, the connections between MTS, justice, our curriculum, our professors, so on and so forth. So please check those out. And again, reach out to us if you have more questions. Our Doctrine of Ministry application deadline is April 30th. And our scholarship deadline for master's degree students is May 31st, with our final application deadline for master's degree students being August 1st. So a lot of time to join us for the fall. We have so many different flexible class options, like weekly hybrid online, monthly hybrid online, asynchronous and synchronous courses that are completely online. So again, please reach out to us to learn more, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.